So our parabola formats are given as follows. In standard form, you have x minus the x vertex squared plus the y vertex. So just like with circles, we take the opposite sign of the quantity that is squared, and then the y vertex outside of the parentheses squared is the same sign. So for example, if you look at this parabola x minus 2 squared minus 5, you would say that inside the parentheses, opposite sign is 2. Outside the parentheses is negative 5. So our vertex would be equal to 2 comma negative 5. Now, another part of a parabola is this a coefficient. And that a coefficient is, again, the coefficient on the squared term. And that tells you how the parabola opens. So if a is positive, then our parabola is going to open up. And if a is negative, then our parabola opens down. So for this question number 60, you could look at the coefficient on this square term of 1 and say that tells us that our parabola opens up because it's positive. And so we have a picture that looks like this, where the parabola opens up and we have 2 comma negative 5 as the vertex. Now, when you look at the definition of the parabola, you see that there is not a denominator, there's not a square root. And that's always going to happen with parabolas because they're the graph of a quadratic equation. So the domain is always going to be negative infinity to infinity because there's no denominator, there's no square root. And then as I have written here, the range is going to involve the y vertex and either a plus or a minus infinity. So if you look at the little picture I've drawn here, you see that the smallest point on the y is going to be negative 5, is going to be the vertex. So we put a square bracket around that because we do want to include that number. And then because our parabola opens up and goes towards positive infinity, the range would go towards positive infinity. So the vertex here is 2 comma negative 5, and then the domain and range are given as follows. Now, of course, this question you can very easily do on your calculator. So if you go through with your calculator, what you would do, and hopefully you can see this, but on your calculator, you would type in the function. Remember, you hit the little X button here next to the alpha key. And what would happen once you type in the function, you would hit graph, and you're trying to identify this lowest point. And your calculator has a really nice feature for that. It has the second calc, and then you can go to minimum, hit enter, and then you need a left and a right bound to that minimum point you're trying to find. So if you look here, my little cursor is blinking to the left of that lowest point, so I can hit enter, and then I move my little cursor over so that it's to the right of the lowest point. Now it is to the right of the lowest point, so I hit enter, enter again, and that will give us the vertex of 2 comma negative 5. And then also the nice thing about the graphing calculator is then you can kind of see visually the picture of it and say, okay, my domain is all reals because of the fact that it goes from negative infinity to infinity. And then my range is starting at negative 5 and going up towards positive infinity.